When I was a kid, I used to hang out at the Wadsworth Athenaeum. I knew when I was young, I wanted to be a painter and artist, very young. So perfect day for me, perfect Saturday was all morning till 1 o'clock in the museum and then go to the movies. So for me, the two things have always been mixed up in my head since an early age. The two things, why not? I've often thought of these paintings as being an amalgamation of being a cross between Renaissance painting and B movies of the 30s. I think that painting used to be what movies are now. You think of a Rubens, guy out there with a spear fighting lions and tigers on big horses, and that's an action flick, Or all those genres were already there. And then when film and camera came along, painting had to become something else to survive, or at least it thought it did. I do a lot of demonstrations so I'll draw and teach at the same time, or paint and teach, and try to show people what I'm talking about. So I see in this mess here the possibility for this figure. I have no idea how he's going to work with this guy, or whether somebody else, or whether it's going to work at all. It's not unusual for it to morph into some other figure, and I just kind of go with it. And I try not to control it too much. If I get this great idea, like, okay, now I'm going to make it into this, and I could get bogged down for 3 weeks and it's not going to work. I went to Boston University, and I picked that school because it offered more figure drawing than any school in the country. I was in the service, I checked out every catalog of every art school, and they had more contact hours with the model than anybody in the country. And I figured that said something about their philosophy. Turned out to be a good basis to make that kind of choice, because you're basically locked up with a naked person in a room for 4 years, whether you're sculpting, whether you're whatever. And that was pretty good. And they had a good sense of values there. They understood what the primary concepts were, and they weren't very trendy. They weren't constantly being led by the nose by the art magazines. They had a core sense of values. And so you went there and you kind of you were in a solid environment and got a good kind of classical education. Somebody once criticized them as being the best 19th century art school in the country, and they just loved that. I think if I'd gone to a place where it was more art magazine oriented and more, what's happening right now, it wouldn't have been right for me. I might have been turned off by the whole experience, I was teaching at a few places back in Boston. I could pick up a class here, pick up a class there, and I took a trip across the country, meaning to go to California, and bumped into Utah. I'd been doing landscape paintings, and Utah blew my mind. And when I got back east, I'd talk a lot about Utah, and somebody said, well, they're looking for somebody who's a figure person at the University of Utah, and I applied for it and got the job and never looked back. I've never been sorry I came out here. Most people who are familiar with my work are familiar with some sort of classical draped figure paintings, which I did for about 10 years. I came to a point where I didn't have anything else to offer with those, and I didn't want to continue along that vein, which was fairly realistic, often from direct observation. I just had nowhere to go with that, and I'd come to a point where I decided not to do that anymore. I didn't know what to do, but there were two things that I wanted to do. One was to not be so serious a person, because I have a good sense of humor, and that just wasn't getting into the paintings. I don't know why it was so serious, and I wanted to see if I had any imagination, which up to that point I didn't think I kind of was somebody who had a good eye, good hand, good eye, and that's kind of what I did. And So I decided on a sabbatical that I would try and figure out how to do that kind of thing. And came down here and spent a really, really difficult winter trying to figure out how to do that. I had no prep for that whatsoever. And what my strategy was to just go ahead and paint anyway, even if I didn't know what it was or where I was going or how to do it. I'd just paint. I'd come in here and work anyway. And most paintings just dissolved into a big mess. After a while, I'd start looking at the big mess and it would start to look interesting, and I would let myself doodle around in the thing and sort of bring something out, and I'd think, well, that's really stupid. You can't do that. And then after a while I decided, yeah, you could do that. Even if you think it's stupid, it's what you're doing, go ahead and do it anyway. Very slowly kind of found my way, and suddenly a couple big paintings emerged that were, for me, were big statements. They were kind of what I was looking for. And I sort of learned something from that to tell other students, which was, when you don't know what to do something. Don't just sit there and do nothing. And something will happen if you stick at it long enough. And then I was off. I was just off into that world. It was a totally different world. And what I discovered was that the person who made those kinds of paintings was a different kind of person who was making the other kinds of paintings. There was more there than I thought was there, or a different kind of person, and I kind of liked that person. So then I became a little bit more like that person. So it becomes a way of painting without intention, or bypassing the burden of your ego and intention and will and desire this, desire that, and try to get out of the way of all that. Originally they started as chaotic patterns that were chaotic just because I didn't know what I was doing. And then you'd find that certain things would stimulate your imagination that you hadn't planned. But then you look back and think, well, let's say I did this and this and this to start off, and then what was an accident or a disaster turns into part of your repertoire, becomes part of your bag of tricks. This is a kind of form of automatic writing. You're really accessing your subconscious, I think I have an idea that whatever goes on inside your skull when you're dreaming is a little bit like this process. That is, at a certain point, probably your visual cortex gets very stimulated. You get lots of random pattern going on, a little bit like white noise visually. And then the brain, which is constructed to find order and chaos, finds what it needs to in these patterns, and you have imagery and dreams, and oftentimes you get a theme that might last for hours. It seems like it lasts for hours every night. I think it's very similar. The studio, this is dark. It was at the university too. I used to keep it fairly dark. Well, so this is a little bit like it's a little sleepy, it's a little dark, it's a little bit like a movie theater before the lights go really dark and the image starts to come up. That's the way I like it.